The subprime crisis has become a symbol of the Bush administration's serious mishandling of so many economic and domestic policy priorities. Just as Katrina sort of became the metaphor for the administration's inability to manage government with the ham-handed efforts of FEMA, the housing mess, which has hit homeowners and neighborhoods with too many foreclosures, credit markets with mountains of debt, and the economy with weak job and economic growth, is further evidence that this administration all too often is ideologically handcuffed and cannot step up to the plate to solve major problems. As our country teeters on the edge of recession for the first time since 1990, the administration is almost powerless to really roll up its sleeves and involve itself in the problem. And you ask yourself the question, why? There are very talented people there. Secretary Paulson, Deputy Secretary Steele. And it's my belief that, as I said, they've had ideological handcuffs imposed on them. Keep the government out of any solution. Do whatever you can, but keep the government out of any solution. And the administration ends up tying itself in a pretzel to come up with solutions that are not direct, that don't really hit the bullseye in terms of solving the problem, and make the crisis worse. And they're always a step behind for the same reason. Now, the administration seems to be unable to get the government moving quickly, decisively, and competently to address the most serious economic crisis we've had in the last decade. It is this irresponsible inaction, attributable, in my judgment, to their ideological opposition to government action, that has exacerbated the housing and economic woes we are facing. And our housing problems have rippled through the economy. The fact is that economic contagions are difficult to contain. It's not like a bottle of water. It's much more like a pond where the ripples move outward, but in this case sometimes get larger. The initial ripple is the foreclosure problem, the very serious problem of foreclosures. But it doesn't stop at foreclosure. The statistics show that every time there's a foreclosure in a community, housing prices decline. And so you've had a decline in housing prices, not all of which is caused by the subprime foreclosure crisis, but certainly been exacerbated by it and probably is a leading, if not the leading cause. The ripple goes outward further. Housing prices decline and the consumer buys less. And here we are, and we're getting reports that this Christmas season isn't a very good one. And again, there are other reasons as well. There are high fuel prices, for instance. But one of the main things that the studies show is when housing prices go down, the consumer feels less flush and spends less. And then finally, there's probably the most outward ripple, which could have the greatest effect, which is the credit crunch. If people aren't lending, if lenders aren't lending to businesses and to individuals, the economy really has a crimp put in it. And so the crisis, the problem, call it what you will, just moves outward and gets larger and larger, and the administration seems unable to aim at the bullseye, to aim at the problem and help ameliorate it, help mitigate it, and thereby lessen the severity of the ripples that move outward. Now, I believe that we could have avoided a lot of this. There's no doubt that an economic slowdown would have occurred, but the administration's inaction could well spell the difference between an economic slowdown and recession.